Draft fans, buckle up and brace yourselves for the League of Intrigue. Mel Kiper Jr. and me, Field Yates, begin to break down the most intriguing prospects of the 2026 NFL Draft. That's coming up. Plus, we'll respond to your questions, your takes, and your draft dreams live as First Draft starts right now. And hello and welcome back to First Draft. I, of course, am Field Yates. He is the great, the venerable, the honorable, the legend, Mel Kiper Jr., and we are live on the NFL on ESPN YouTube channel, plus ESPN2, and wherever you get your podcasts. Mel, where else are we available, Mel? Are we streaming somewhere?
I think we're everywhere, Field. I think we got it going last week. We're in the mid-season form in terms of prospects. So what we're trying to do is just highlight guys that are, we say, intriguing this week, right? Mm-hmm. We've given you guys your 10 that you looked at throughout the summer, but intriguing guys for one reason or another are guys that we're going to highlight today. You have 5, I have 5. We're going to move through August and September and bring to light a lot of guys that you may not be familiar with, or guys you're familiar with, but a different spin on where they are right now as opposed to where they may be in late April when the draft rolls around.
Mel, we'll get to those intriguing players. And by the way, intriguing is one of those words that I like for podcast, Mel, because it's subjective, right? What you find intriguing, I might not find. So I'm not sure we'll have any crossover picks. We did not compare notes before we submitted them to the great Joe G, our producer. But I have to share one tweet here, Mel, because I kind of felt the same way. This one comes from Doug Powell, who said on Twitter, "It warms my heart to see you and your dad talking ball again, Mel." We're back. We're back.
I like that, Field.
Yeah.
I love it, man. You can say, I'm here today, Maryland Terrapins I got going on here. You got your Penn State here because you're going to be, I think, talking about maybe a Penn State quarterback. I got a little birdie in my ear telling me that. But yeah, that's great. And the haircut, we both got haircuts at the same time. You do look like probably
Mel Kiper Jr.
I'd say me and maybe 86. 86, I think, was the year. 86 was the year that I was told by some I looked more like a leader of a rock band. Okay. And you're right on the borderline of being that guy, I feel. You look like you could be as well. Some band out there you could be the lead singer for.
We're getting there. I wasn't alive in 86, so I'm going to take you at your word for that's how you looked at that time.
Trust me. My hair was longer, but just as thick. I can tell you that. Just as thick. So hopefully yours is as thick when you're 65 as it is now. Mine obviously is not, Fielding. I've taken a few hits on the hair front over the last, say, 10 to 15 years.
Nothing gold can stay, right? Isn't that what they taught us growing up here, Mel? Just one more bit of housekeeping before we get started. First of all, from now until the new year, First Draft is with you every Wednesday at noon on the NFL on ESPN YouTube channel, and later on that day on ESPN2. And for all of our breakdowns from the season, there's a QR code that you can scan on your screen to access the entire First Draft YouTube playlist. So Mel, last week was the guys that we described as basically can't miss, right? This week, we're diving into the players that we consider amongst the most intriguing, and that's going to include a couple of quarterbacks. Remember, we talked about, 5 last week, led by Arch Manning and Lenoris Sellers. But who is the first player that comes to mind for the most intriguing for you in 2026?
Well, we saw Cam Ward, go to Washington State after Incarnate Word, to Washington State, then to Miami, becomes the number 1 pick overall. Fernando Mendoza, he was originally going to go to maybe to Yale, right? In the Ivy League, Penn, Yale. Yale was the one who was considered. Ends up at Cal, has a really good season last year, despite some issues which I'll get to. Now he's in Indiana. Indiana, right? You think about Signetti and what he's done with quarterbacks, wherever he's been. Now, Tino Sunseri was the quarterback coach and co-coordinator. He's now at UCLA as coordinator, right?
Yep.
So Graham Whitmer takes over that position. Chandler Whitmer takes over that position, coming from the NFL. But Shanahan's still there as coordinator. So I think you'll see now the quarterback situation there with Curtis Rourke last year. Had a great year, then injured, was a 7th-round pick, right? So wherever Signetti is, quarterbacks do well. Offensive line should be okay. Added the running back in the transfer portal from Maryland Terrapins, Roman Hemby, right? Yep. Surratt's there, the wide receiver. So you think about where we are with Fernando Mendoza. He was sacked 41 times last year at Cal. Horrific offensive line, right?
Right.
Behind the sticks with penalties. Yet Jack Endries, that heck of a tight end, was a go-to guy. Guess where Endries is? He's at Texas now with Arch Manning. Yeah. Jay Knott was banged up, so he didn't have much of a running game. Ott's now at Oklahoma, and Mendoza goes Cal. Think about the hits the Golden Bears took. Quarterback, running back, and tight end all gone to elsewhere, right? So Mendoza's at Indiana.
Yeah.
Fernando Mendoza sacked a lot, but I'll tell you what, the poise under pressure. He's 6'5", 235 pounds, really smart, slips and slides very effectively in the pocket. Think about those 41 sacks. Shedeur was sacked 42 times, right?
Yeah.
Think about Drew Allar, 16 times, right? Or no, Garrett Nussmeier 16 times, Drew Allar 19 times, Cade Klubnik 23 times, and the North Sellers 33 times. He was 41 times sacked at Cal last year. Hopefully he gets a little bit more help from the O-line in Indiana, which is coached by Bob Bostad, who is one of the best offensive line coaches in college football. So for me, Fernando Mendoza, why is he intriguing? You did it at Cal, but you were under the gun. You were under a lot of pressure. Now, expectations high at Indiana, right? Based on what Curtis Rourke did. Fernando Mendoza has a chance to soar up draft boards with a big season with the Indiana Hoosiers and a very quarterback-friendly offense.
Yeah, Mel, I'm going to be doing a first-round mock draft later on this month. Mendoza will be in there, by the way. It's a projection, of course, and a reminder that Mendoza is eligible to come out next year, but has multiple years of eligibility left. So he could be back in Indiana for a second season in 2026. We'll, of course, dive into that if that becomes his reality. This is an arm talent player, though, right? Some of the throws that he makes, Mel, are just flat out incredible. A guy who, as you alluded to, had nothing around him. And that 68% completion percentage that you referenced, that number could have been way higher if he got some help from both his offensive line and his skill players, not named Jack Andrews. Go ahead.
71% or higher in 5 games.
Yeah, no,
Mendoza was. When you're under that kind of heat and pressure all the time, and you got penalties galore putting you behind the sticks. Like I said, injuries had a heck of a year. The Cal tight end, I say, who's now moved on to Texas. But to deal with what he did with not a clean pocket very often, yet throw the strikes he did, hang tough in that pocket, and deliver the ball as accurately as he did. That's why I'm excited to see what Fernando Mendoza can do at Indiana this year.
Super loose arm. He's very, very confident. And that's probably something that it's required when you're playing at an undermanned offense and keeping them, at least for parts of games, in the game last season at Cal. How did Miami not get this kid? He's a Miami Gardens kid. The U couldn't land Fernando Mendoza. I'm surprised that one took place. My first pick, Mel, is also a quarterback, and you've got good sources, because my answer is Drew Allar. Mel, if Drew Allar walked down the street, you'd be saying to yourself, wow, that looks like the kind of guy who was built in quarterback factory, right? 6'5", big, strapping, huge arm, absolutely, like he's beefed up, right? Not thick, but just like he looks the part. This guy absolutely feels like he's got an NFL body at a very, very young age. We've been talking about Drew Allar since he got to Penn State. He's been playing consequential football for multiple seasons for Penn State. There are some moments that are pretty good for Drew Allar while at Penn State. I thought if he had played really well in the college football playoff and then declared for the draft, he could have gone as high as number 2 overall now, because of course the Cleveland Browns at number 2 were in the quarterback market. And yet he wasn't great when it really mattered the most. It was fine, but it wasn't perfect by any stretch for Drew Allar. And this is a player who I feel like, Mel, the best version of him is really, really tantalizing. The flash plays for Drew Allar are really impressive. I mentioned that rocket arm. He's got a rocket arm. And I think you dropped a comp almost a year or so ago, Mel, might have been during last regular season, that I'm going to have a hard time forgetting with Drew Allar. A little bit of Joe Flacco in him, right? This huge, strong arm, this big frame. He is a sufficient athlete, Mel. He's not a dynamic athlete by any stretch. And the thing about Drew Allar that I want to see more of this year is playing with pace. I feel like he can be really deliberate, and his release can get super long and extended. It just plays like a little bit too slow sometimes, does Drew Allar. The best version of him is very talented. I didn't think the best version came out nearly enough last year. If he puts it together, though, he'll catapult into that conversation of the top 5 or so quarterbacks.
Yeah, and I think when you look at the weapons and having 2 running backs return, as Drew Allar did, it's kind of reminiscent of what Ohio State had happened. Not to the level they did with all those 11, 12 guys coming back, but key guys like Denai Dennis Sutton at defensive end, certainly the 2 running backs, Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen, and Drew Allar going back. And you add guys in the portal. Some receivers have to come through. Trevor Penn is a heck of a player coming from Syracuse. I really like him. He's one of those guys who's intriguing as well, because he can be a go-to guy in that, Edelman Amendola mode in that slot, and can do some real good work, that dirty work on those third downs in the middle of the field. So Drew Allar, to me, if he can just, like say, level it off in the big games, step up and deliver with the kind of physical talent that he brings to that quarterback position, he could be in line. Everybody's talking about all these other quarterbacks. Drew Allar's getting pushed down a little bit. Drew Allar has a year, and I considered Penn State as my national championship pick. I'm going with Texas, by the way. Texas Longhorns are my pick. Second in line would be Penn State. So Penn State, Texas, I think are the two best teams in college football right now. Other challengers as well. But if he has that year where he leads them to a national title or right in that mix, which he should be able to do, Drew Allar catapults right up there with all the other quarterbacks we've discussed in the top 10, top 15 of this draft.
Yeah, Mel, it's worth noting as well, talking about these quarterbacks, is that right now we're projecting all of them to come out because they're eligible, right? We're talking about every draft eligible quarterback that has piqued our interest. Not all of them are going to come out next year. We've already laid out how Arch Manning might be a better bet to return to school than come out, but there are others who fit in that category as well. Lenora Sellers is not a guarantee to come out this upcoming year. He's only played one season of college ball up to this point. So there's going to be room for someone to make his push up the board. I mentioned Lenora Sellers. There's a teammate of his that's caught your attention. Who is it, Mel?
Anytime you see Bruce Feldman's freak list have a guy 2 years in a row at number one, that automatically gets your attention. And Nyck Harbor, wide receiver, South Carolina, I think he was like 33 when ESPN, I always check the rankings for high school recruiting. I think he was like 33. ESPN.com had him coming out in that general area field. But in terms of freaks, he's been number one 2 years in a row. Now, did that translate? This is why he's intriguing. Did it translate to the field? Okay, 12 catches first year, but 26 the next year. Games where he had 3 or fewer receptions. I want to see 7, 8, 9 receptions a game field from Nyck Harbor. I want to see Lenora Sellers going to this kid who should be a matchup nightmare. He should be uncoverable. The kid, 6'5", 235 pounds. I mean, with the kind of speed he has, track guy, now he focused strictly on football going into this season. So he's working on the routes, working on the consistency catching the football. And I thought he was pretty good in that area. He made some off catches look pretty routine, okay? Off-target catches look pretty routine. To me, just keep developing and working on all the nuances of playing that wide receiver position, okay? Slight adjustments, all the things you need to do in terms of reading that defense, going against those cornerbacks in college, they should be able to get the best of for the most part. So for me, Nyck Harbor should be a guy, I want to see him average not 2, 3 catches a game field. I want to see him average 6, 7, 8 catches a game. I want to see him be the go-to guy for Lenora Sellers at South Carolina. So Nyck Harbor, when you have that kind of physicality and that kind of athleticism, and you're a sprinter on a track team with incredible sub 4.4 speed, and you're considered the number one freak 2 years in a row, could be another 3 years in a row for Nyck Harbor, produce to the level of your talent on a game-to-game basis. If he does that, he could be, this guy was a tight end defensive end in high school, right? He's got tight end H-back size. You know, he could be certainly a first-round draft choice, no question about it. I want to see him step up and have the kind of results and have the kind of production that his talent indicates he should at the collegiate level. When you're going against, I'll say it for the first time, the AOGs and other occupation guys, Nyck Harbor should dominate most of those guys. Let's see if he does it.
All right, Mel, I got a lot of thoughts here. Let me start with this. And you almost went there, I felt like yourself. Are you positive that Nyck Harbor's best football position is wide receiver?
No.
Is there a party that wonders when you're watching him play, like, I think this guy might be better as a pass rusher than a pass catcher? Because there's a part of me that has thought that at times while watching Nyck Harbor. And I'm not saying that I don't expect him to change his path, but I just, when you look at the body type and you look at the movement skills, there's a part of me that thinks that it would translate even better if he was a pass rusher. And oh, by the way, South Carolina lost a handful of pass rusher, a handful of defensive front players this past year to the draft. Some very, very capable pass rushers at that. Back in my scouting days, Mel, with the Patriots and the Chiefs, we used to have this very nuanced grading scale, and there was one grade that was not so specific. It was much more general, but it was reserved for very few players. It was just a developmental player grade. Guy that you couldn't say, hey, he's a starting wide receiver in year one for us, or a guy that's a, second year, but by year 2 to 3, we expect him to be our third corner. No, this was a player that was just a developmental player. Took on a lot of different shapes and sizes. Nyck Harbor has made me think about that because I don't know if we lined up and played a game tomorrow, Mel, whether you trust Nyck Harbor to be an every down player. That being said, rare athletic ability. Bruce Feldman's list that you referenced encapsulates that. I remember watching Nyck Harbor as a track sprinter, track star in high school on the internet. Like, he would just be making the rounds as a viral sensation every once and a while. He is a big, gigantic, moldable piece of clay. This is a massive year for him, Mel. He won't crack my top 5 wide receivers and our positional rankings that will come out early in the college football season. He won't be in my first round mock draft later on this month. But in terms of players that have a lot of room to grow this year, he is certainly near the top of the list.
20 years of age, Field, just turned 20.
Yeah.
20 years of age, young. You say he won't be in your top five, right? In August, early September. But after 4, 5, 6 games, if he's doing what I think he's capable of, he will certainly be in that top group.
He'll have a chance to get there, Mel. He just needs to make some serious strides. He needs to become a refined football player, not just an athlete, which is where I think he is more of right now. My next pick, Mel, to go out to Oregon. They lost Terrence Ferguson to the draft, second round pick of the Rams. The next man up there, though, Mel, might end up having a similar draft outlook to Terrence Ferguson. It is Kenyon Sadiq. Just a supercharged athlete is Kenyon Sadiq. The kind of guy who had limited opportunities because of Terrence Ferguson and because, frankly, there have been a lot of good pass catchers at Oregon recently. Obviously, Tez Johnson, and then this past year, or last year, they added Evan Stewart from Texas A&M, right? There's always going to be guys that do a lot of work for Oregon. But Kenyon Sadiq, every time he gets the ball, Mel, just feels like good things happen. It wasn't very often. He had just 24 catches last season for 308 yards. You think about some of these tight ends, though, that can be moved around the formation, guys that you can scheme up opportunities for, and guys that when the football is in his hands, good things happen. Kenyon Sadiq certainly feels that way. I'm not sure yet if he's more H-back or tight end, but the skill set pretty impressive.
I'll say this. Kenyon Sadiq's my number one tight end, H-back, whatever you want to call him. Dante Moore's the new quarterback at Oregon. We'll see what happens there. But I think for Kenyon Sadiq to see the athleticism and the ability after the catch, I mean, he's hurdling defensive backs. Yeah. He's doing things that only the great talents, the great athletes do. This kid is a star in the making. There's no doubt about that. He's got to be the feature guy. You mentioned Terrence Ferguson moves on to the National Football League. This is Kenyon Sadiq's year. We saw glimpses of spectacular potential. Spectacular. Yeah. And we want to see it come together this year. Like we say, Nyck Harbor, same thing. Kenyon Sadiq puts it together. You're talking about, let's say, he's going to enter the season as my number one tight end, H-back, whatever you want to call him.
Yeah, last thing I'll say on him, Mel, that really impressed me as well, he led all Oregon players in special team snaps last year. That speaks to a player who cares about the team, right? Because there's not much glory to playing on special teams for a guy who will make his money in the NFL as potentially a prolific pass catcher. A lot of dirty work on special teams compared to other jobs you'll be asked to do as a football player. How about you, Mel? Where are we going next?
Going to the defensive side of the ball, young fielding to a guy. I got my Maryland Terrapin shirt on here. He started out with the Terps. Darrell Jackson Jr. Okay, starts out at Maryland, Miami, Florida with the Hurricanes. Florida State sits out the year. Last year, you thought with that defensive front, it was going to be like the old fearsome foursome days with the Rams. You had Peyton and Marvin Jones Jr. at defense end. You had Joshua Farmer and Darrell Jackson Jr. along the interior. Just didn't work out. Patrick Payton didn't build on the previous year. Now he's moving on to LSU from Florida State. Marvin Jones Jr. moves on to Oklahoma. Joshua Farmer's a fourth-round pick of the Patriots. Who's the last man standing of those four? Darrell Jackson Jr. What I want to see from this kid, I tell you, awesome, 6'5" with 338 field, huge hands, incredibly long arms. If you could draw up, I was talking to a scout in the NFL last year, going into last season, about Darrell Jackson Jr. So this guy screams top 10, 15 to the first round. Nobody looks the part more. He's the LTPer. He looks the part, right? But guess what? First 7 games of this past year, half a sack for a guy with that kind of talent. Last 5 games, though, 3 sacks. And they came over with 2 gains, but he had 15 tackles as well over those final 5 games. Disengaging from the blocker. Needs to work on that. He spent a lot of time during the offseason working on everything to get ready. He seems like he wants to go out and produce to the level expected, right? So again, Darrell Jackson Jr., defensive tackle, Florida State, little new scheme there. Guys who are around him are gone. He's the centerpiece. He's the focal point. And he certainly has a talent with that size, the arm length, the huge hands, and he has now all that experience now. Played at 3 different schools, right? To be the guy that kind of becomes the guy that all of a sudden, like we talked about with Harbor, that's kind of the theme here. Produce to the level of your talent. We've been waiting for Darrell Jackson Jr. to do it. This could be the season it all comes together. And if it does, that's why he's intriguing. He could be a first-round pick. If it doesn't, he's considered what? An underachiever. So don't have that underachiever tag. You want to eliminate that. You want to go out there and dominate. I want to see this guy week in and week out wreaking havoc in the backfield for the Florida State Seminoles.
Mel, unlike last year where we had this super deep running back class, we're going to have not a very deep running back class, but we could have back-to-back years of strong interior defensive line classes. Peter Woods, we talked about last week on the show from Clemson, at the top of the heap. But you're right. There are some intriguing players, including Darrell Jackson at that DT
Field.
spot.
And guess what? August 30th, they open up. What? At Doak Campbell Stadium, Bobby Bowden Field. What happens there? Alabama comes to town. The Crimson Tide come to town with some really good interior linemen, right, on that line.
That's right.
And Darrell Jackson Jr. is going to be right away put to the test against some really good players. Alabama looking to bounce back. Like I said, that center guard spot, some good football players. Good evaluation game for Darrell Jackson Jr. August 30th.
Brailsford, the center for Alabama from Washington, and Jaden Roberts, the guard for Alabama as well, who could be draftable prospects this upcoming year. All right, I'll take my next one here, Mel, and moving on to Alabama, which ironically, I suppose, safety Keon Sabb, Mel. This is not your average safety in terms of size. He is an absolutely gigantic safety. Got a great build. And I thought that last year showed some really good movement skills, good center field instincts as well, some good on-ball production. There were times in which you saw him rove in the back end, and you're thinking to yourself, there's no way this guy can be this large and this fluid at the same time. Got banged up down the stretch and missed some time at the end of last season. He has the size, Mel, that suggests that he should be this physical, imposing box safety as well. I think I want to see a little bit more of that physically imposing nature for Keon Sabb, but they just don't make safeties that move this well at this size. And I was thinking about I was talking to a scout about this recently. Can you imagine if him and Caleb Downs were still together at Alabama? Caleb Downs, we talked about last week, the cleanest prospect perhaps in the entire class. And Alabama's got no shortage of defensive talent, Mel. But Keon Sabb, a guy that intrigues me quite a bit this year, could see himself move up that safety board.
Yeah, move from that day 3 category up into that day 2 category with a big season. No question about it, Phil.
Yep. So in the safety class, Mel, obviously Caleb Downs will define it. But this past year, we had a couple guys that we thought, a couple guys that were borderline first round grades, Malachi Starks and also Nyck Worry. All right, Mel, back to you. Stay in the SEC, and a player that at this time last year was being discussed as maybe a first round lock.
Yeah, Harold Perkins Jr., right? Kid out of LSU, go back to when he was a true freshman. I mean, he's getting about 13 tackles for loss, forcing fumbles, sacking quarterbacks, doing everything. Now, size-wise, with 6'1", about 220, 225 in that area, where do you play him? They go to off-ball. Well, that's not really what he's really geared towards, and that's not his forte. It's getting there for the quarterback. I see bend, okay, coming off the edge. I see cat-like quickness, and I see him track down running backs and quarterbacks in the open field like a cat. To me, Harold Perkins Jr. just unleash him. They got wit weeks. He can make tackles all over the field with his great range, right? But if you let him and blitzing Blake Baker, let Harold Perkins Jr. go after the quarterback. He had the injury last year, the ACL, coming back from that. That's why he's intriguing. He had a great start to his career, looked like one of the best defensive players in college football. Then you're moving around. You don't know really where are we going to define him? Where are we going to lock him in? He's almost so talented, too talented, we always say, for your own good. You become that versatile piece. They're trying to find the best way to maximize what you bring to the defense, right? And he's only 6'1", 220, 225. But off the edge, to me, getting after the quarterback and chasing. Now, he's got to be in the open field, a little bit more reliable tackler. He works on that aspect of his game, comes back full strength from the injury. This is the year Harold Perkins Jr., I think, reestablishes himself, Field, as the guy we thought way back in, was it 2022, that true freshman season, that he would be. So I love the talent, love the attitude. And if you can get after the quarterback and you got to be able to chase Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen and tackle him, right? You got to have a guy on your defense that can fly to the football. He can get after the quarterback. Then he can be 25 yards down the field in a blink. Okay, that's Harold Perkins Jr. I want to see him kind of, like I say, reestablish. That's why he's intriguing. Reestablish the greatness that we saw him with him and in him back when he was, 18, 19 years of age.
Yeah, Mel, the NFL's had some problems recently with guys that offer so much versatility that it's actually in some ways a detriment to them, right? I think about Isaiah Simmons as the poster child of that. It's like he can be a safety, he can be a linebacker, he can rush the passer. And it turned out that maybe he was never great enough at any of those things to be just one thing. And so he's become more of a journeyman than he is a star. When he went, I think, 9th overall to the Arizona Cardinals, despite his incredible athletic ability. Harold Perkins, whatever it is that you feel most comfortable at, a full season playing that position, improving your NFL impact at that position, I think would bode very well for his future.
Last thing I'll say with him, number 4 overall player coming out of the prep ranks on ESPN.com.
Sure.
So it was right away, you're proven right. They're proven right. ESPN, the evaluators, great evaluators on ESPN, they're proven right coming out of high school because what he did as a freshman showed that. And like I say, you mentioned circumstances moving you around, then the injury are the reasons why this is the year to shine for Harold Perkins Jr. And like I say, what do they start out with? At Clemson, August 30th, right, with Cade Klubnik, right? Get after Cade Klubnik a little bit if you're Harold Perkins Jr. Clemson comes in with a team on both sides of the ball, ready to do some serious damage. LSU comes in with expectations as well. Brian Kelly and the LSU Tigers and Garrett Nussmeier, revamped O-line there. Their defense has some stars led by Harold Perkins Jr. This is the year for Brian Kelly to get off to a faster start, right? But Clemson stands in your way. This is a really good evaluation game with Harold Perkins Jr. against Cade Klubnik and that Clemson offense.
All right, so Harold Perkins Jr. has played multiple positions in college. So has Sonny Styles from Ohio State, who is a safety who's now a stand-up inside linebacker for the Buckeyes, and he's going to be one of the premier players on that defense. Obviously, Caleb Downs will be the premier player on that entire roster. Well, Jeremiah Smith probably has something to say about that. One of the two premier players on that roster. But Sonny Styles is going to have a lot of responsibility. He'll be the quarterback of that defense. He'll be one of the captains of the Ohio State defense, Mel. And I thought that he looked, by the end of last season, like a guy who had been playing linebacker for the entirety of his career. He is, unsurprisingly, he's an incredibly impressive athlete, right? That go figure for a guy that was previously a safety. Long, instinctive, finds his way to the football, had 100 tackles last year. No surprise as well when you're a former safety. Probably could stand to add a little more body armor, right? Because you're going to be taking on that sheer force of 320-pound guards and 340-pound tackles with regularity at the NFL level. He's come a long way in a short period of time, and that Ohio State defense this upcoming year lost a lot of talent. Their two defensive ends and Cody Simon and a pair of three corners as well, or two corners as well. A lot of responsibility for Sonny Styles. He has a chance, I think, to be a top 50-ish player if he continues on his trajectory.
Yeah, Caleb Downs and Sonny Styles, the two key pieces back. Davidson and Mendoza in the corner. He's cut down on the penalties, but you mentioned it. All defensive linemen. Simon was the leader, right? The B's move on. So now all of a sudden it's Sonny Styles. And like I say, now you think about Caleb Downs. They're the two leaders of this defense going into this season with a rebuilt defense and a new look on the offensive side of the ball as well. So Ohio State's going to be an interesting team to watch coming off that national championship year where they had some stumbles. I mean, let's face it, they lost to Oregon regular season, right? Lose at home to Michigan. Had some close things. Let Notre Dame get back in that national championship game. But all those guys that were responsible for that national championship win, that title for Ohio State, most of those key guys are going. Styles, one of the guys that are back, is going to have a huge year.
And by the way, Ohio State's still figuring out who's going to be their week one starting quarterback, right? Currently in a competition, or I guess the competition will begin any day now once practices roll into a more important portion of the August calendar. All right, you got one more here, Mel. Make it count. Who is your pick?
Well, I think the theme's been intriguing, but coming off injury. Harold Perkins Jr., right? Coming off an injury. Darrell Jackson Jr., not as productive as he needs to be, right? So you think about Nyck Harbor, not as productive as this town. Rod Moore coming off the injury. ACL spring, not playing last year. Coming back, it's going to be, it'll take some time because you have an injury and think, oh, it's automatic. Well, you got to clean up sometimes that injury. You go back in, you fix it up. Now you're coming back maybe, as he said, a little slower than anticipated from the injury. But when's he going to be back? In September? When is it for Rod Moore? Because guess what? You go back to 3 years ago, the year before the national championship, when they lost to TCU, right? He was great. National Big Ten championship game against Purdue, that game against TCU. He was spectacular. He had 6 interceptions over that year and combined with the national championship year. Like I say, out last year with the ACL injury. So Rod Moore, to me, played his best football early on. And when he was playing that great football, showing great range in that secondary and intercepting 6 balls over a 2-year period, Jim Harbaugh commented that the work ethic and the preparation of Rod Moore was super impressive. Okay, and that was when he was a very young football player with the Michigan Wolverines. Now, he had a year away from the game, still coming back, working his way back to 100%. Like you said, about 85%. Yep. See where he is. When's he get to 100%? If he can, again, we talk about reestablish what you were. Perkins is looking to do that at LSU coming off an injury. Rod Moore's looking to do that at Michigan. As early in his career, I thought he was playing his best football. And it's from that point, solid year after that, then the injury. So great, then solid, an injury. We want to see him be one of the best safeties in college football. And Michigan certainly needs him back on the field. You don't want to rush him, but when he gets back to 100% sometime, hopefully in September, Rod Moore, safety Michigan, is a guy to watch.
By the way, two notes there on Rod Moore, or at least related to Rod Moore. Keon Sabb used to be one of his safety teammates at Michigan. Sabb transferred to Alabama from Michigan. Last note, regardless of what happens this year with Rod Moore, he will be forever in Michigan lore. He was the man that brought down Jalen Milroe in that game against Alabama. I think it was either the end of the fourth quarter or it was overtime. And I think it ended up forcing Alabama to have to go for it on fourth down. They did not convert later on in that drive. So Rod Moore made a game-changing play for Michigan on one of the biggest stages.
Did it against the Buckeyes as well. So, yeah, Rod Moore, like I say, Field, if he can just, I saw so much of his kid. He was marked down because you always look at early on, before they're draft eligible, who are the guys that really get your attention, that you know are going to be high draft choices? And early on in his career, when he was, like I say, just a young 18, 19-year-old player, Rod Moore was that guy.
Last one here, Mel, for me. Usually when you're a smaller guy, do they give you a few extra pounds on the roster or do they take away a few pounds? You're the 175-pound guy soaking wet who they list at 185. And then when you're a big guy, if you're like 340 yards or 340 pounds, they push you down to like 320. The reason I bring that up is that Suntarine Perkins from Ole Miss is listed on their official roster at 6'1" and 210 pounds. 6'1", 210. So again, if he's on the smaller side, they probably are being generous. Suntarine Perkins is an edge rusher, Mel. He is an edge rusher who had 10.5 sacks last season, tied for the second most in the SEC. He can flat out go as an edge rusher. He's an incredibly difficult player for big offensive tackles to keep up with from a quickness, speed, agility standpoint. However, when offensive tackles get their hands on Suntarine Perkins, it's not a fair fight. 320 pounds versus 210 pounds, maybe more like 205 pounds, is a mismatch. I don't know what to do with this player. I mean, I love watching him on gotta-have-it passing situations where he gets to just pin his ears back and go, but I don't really know what that translates to at the NFL level. Is he a stand-up inside linebacker? That, I think, would be one of the more logical paths for Suntarine Perkins, but something's got to give because that frame is not built to last as a hand-in-the-dirt defensive end or stand-up outside linebacker at the NFL level.
Saturdays in college football Field, I think we have to spend a Saturday together because what I do is, I don't know how you attack it. Yeah, you're watching all the games, and I have all the depth charts in front of me.
Yeah.
And what I do is, Field, I get my various colored pens, and I'll put check marks next to young players. And you talk about guys like Perkins, when they pop in games, and I see at the end of the day, how many check marks do they have, right? Yeah. He had a lot of check marks. Yeah. And like you say, but you talk about the guy, you mentioned it with Nyck Harbor. Some guys are too versatile for their own good. That Swiss Army knife, what do you do with them? Where do you play them? Where does he fit in? Talk about Harold Perkins Jr. They didn't really know because at 6'1", 220, what happens there? Perkins as well, undersized. What is he? What is he going to define himself as? What will he ultimately weigh? What will he test as? This is the kind of year, evaluate him, see how they use him, and see what he develops into physically.
He needs like 30 pounds, like at least, right? Like we're talking 30 pounds conservatively to play as an outside linebacker at
I'd
the
say
NFL
just give me 10 or 15.
10 or 15.
I'll meet you halfway on that Field. Just give me 10 or 15 pounds on Perkins.
Yeah,
okay. And we'll be talking about two Perkins, Suntarine Perkins and Harold Perkins Jr. Okay?
Yes, totally.
As being guys that you just want on your defense. Because guess what? They can fly. Yeah. They can fly to the football, these two kids.
I mean, they really can. I mean, Suntarine Perkins, like such an intriguing prospect. Just again, I just don't know if you had to draft him tomorrow. I don't know where he stacks on your board. Again, he's 210 pounds. He might be a safety in some people's eyes just based off of the size. Others, I think the more logical path is if he can show he can maybe play some stand-up inside linebacker. That being said, he has put on some very impressive displays up to this point. All right, Mel, so again, the idea was intriguing players. It was to be subjective, and it was very subjective. We were all over the board here, Mel, but that is going to do it for this edition of First Draft. One more time, a reminder. Do not forget to scan that QR code, like and subscribe to the podcast, and tune in every Wednesday on the NFL on ESPN YouTube channel. We're also on ESPN2 or wherever you get to your podcasts. And don't forget to send us your questions using the hashtag FirstDraft for a chance to be on the program. Mel, I miss you already, my friend. I'll talk to you again next week.
You got it, Field. Take care, pal.